Hi, y'all. Welcome to part 2 of how I got started in jewelry. This will be dedicated to the Dartmouth Jewelry Studio, founded in 1966, as a very unique creating space. Open at the time, it was open to the community and sort of a way to bring more arts into the communities after World War II and veterans coming back into society. And that's how it all started. When I was there, it was called the Donald Claflin Studio. It has been renamed, but I'll always know it as the Donald Claflin Studio. That was a Tiffany designer from the 60s or around that time. Jewelry Studio served as my initial inspiration for my work. That's where I got to explore a lot of my skills and learn what my interests were, and I would just go into the studio right after class, after I was done with homework or after any major project, and I would just have that time for myself to explore, free of grades, free of any expectations. I would go there and just hang out if that's what I wanted to do. And I still keep in touch with a lot of people that I met there and I became friends with. Just a very unique environment in that way, especially at Dartmouth. It was nice to have that. Almost, it's a liberal art school, not an art school. So, like I mentioned in my first video, even though the arts weren't necessarily encouraged, for me, the jewelry studio was a life hack, and I found a community of like-minded individuals in there. I'd spend most of my time just making stuff. And when it became very serious for me was second year. I told Jeff, my teacher in the studio, he's a director as well, I want to work with gold, and he's like, okay. And I've always been very ambitious in that way of being like, all right, I want to do this next, and he was like, okay. Like everyone's working with silver, and I walked in, and I've always loved gold, and I was curious to start working with it. So he's like, all right, why don't we do this? Like, he had me learn about this technique, ancient Greek gold granulation, and then I found a grant that I could apply for. It was like $1,200 from the class of 19. And I applied for the grant, I received it, and then I bought my first ounce of gold then. For me, it was one of my proudest moments, simply because that's where I got my initial funding to pursue this interest of mine. And I remember, everyone's intimidated by gold simply because it's this precious metal and you don't want to mess it up. What if you screw it up? For me, it was more of I realized, okay, if you don't like whatever you made, you just melt it and then you do it again. Gold is very forgiving in that way, especially the higher carat gold. It's just not one of those things you fear. Other metals, they become contaminated as you melt them and so on, but gold is very unique in that way. I just found that I could melt it and make it into however many pieces I wanted to each time. And I learned how to make the granulation, and I made a bracelet and a collection of pieces, and I was very proud of that. Creative confidence was definitely boosted at the jewelry studio. Before then, I don't think I would have felt confident to say, oh, I make stuff and I like making stuff. A relaxed environment, so unlike my classes and so on, I went whenever I was inspired to make something or when I wanted to, as opposed to more strict parts of the academic lifestyle. So for me, it was just a life hack. And then when it came time to figure out what I wanted to do, I shared with Jeff and Case, who was also one of my mentors at the studio, what I wanted to do, and they kind of helped me out in terms of brainstorming ideas. And although at first I could feel a little hesitation, simply because if you've been in jewelry, you realize how difficult it can be starting off. But eventually I figured it out. I got my fellowship, and then that allowed me to stay an extra year just working on campus, and again funded my initial I wouldn't call it startup money, but definitely my initial materials for me to experiment. That was through the grant department at Dartmouth. So yeah, I got support from there, and then that's where it all started, at the Hopkins Center for the Arts in New Hampshire. It's, never in a million years would I have said I'm gonna go to Dartmouth, learn how to make jewelry, and try to make that my career. My expectations are completely different, so I'm very happy to be, where I am today and dedicating this part 2 to the jewelry studio, simply because I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for that. So I appreciate you all for watching, and stay tuned for part 3 of the video. Thank you.